Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Night School. This is your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. I don't know why I say good evening. I used to say peace, family. Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Let me keep it consistent. I'm just a little nervous. It's the night before elections. But anyway, here on Night School, right here at the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold conversations, deep dives even, about the most intense debates, the most contested subjects, the most urgent conversations going on in the world today. And what we try to not do is have those superficial cable news talking points, that drive-by analysis. We instead choose to have real, as I said, deep dives that allow us to really wrestle with some issues. And tonight is no exception. In fact, tonight is the most night schoolish we got to get, because it's the night before the U.S. elections. And there are a lot of things on the ballot. There are local ballot initiatives. There are mayoralties. There are gubernatorial races. There are local or state legislatures that are in the balance right now. Of course, the U.S. Congress, both the House and the Senate, both chambers of the U.S. Congress are going to be radically altered potentially by tomorrow's vote. And of course, as you've probably heard, we're going to have a new president. No matter what happens in tomorrow's election, we are going to have a new president of the United States. And for a lot of people, that is a still difficult decision to make. You know, I am of the belief that if anyone is considering Donald Trump at this moment, they're probably going to vote for Donald Trump. If you still think after everything you've seen that Donald Trump is a viable candidate, then you probably don't care that much about white supremacy. You don't care that much about Islamophobia. You don't care that much about xenophobia. You don't care that much about anti-Semitism. You don't care that much that your president is literally, reenacting oral sex on a microphone 5 days before an election. I mean, dude is weird. But that's not the only thing that we have to think about. It's not just, do you vote for Trump or not, although that's what mainstream media wants you to think this is about. Or even, do you vote for Kamala or not? It's not that simple either. There are other intense moral issues on the table, even with regard to this presidential election, particularly, even if you take Trump off the table, even if you said from the beginning that he's a non-starter for you, there are many people, myself included, who are still here saying, but what about Gaza? What about Palestine? What about the fact that there is an active and ongoing genocide right now that is being prosecuted by Israel, but that is being funded and underwritten and in some ways endorsed, sometimes tacitly, sometimes explicitly, by the U.S. government, the Biden-Harris administration? And while the Biden administration is in charge, not the Harris administration, Vice President Harris has been in those rooms and she said she supports what's going on. And when asked what she'll do different, she hasn't given a very good answer, at least not to many people. And so in some states, there is a movement. And there's been a movement since the Biden candidacy or Biden campaign was still in force that said, if there's no ceasefire, there will be no vote. If you can't commit to a ceasefire, which is the lowest of bars, there will be no vote. Now, other people who say, hey, that sounds good, but there's too much at stake to hold them accountable in that way because we don't want Trump. That's the conversation, and that's the conversation I want to have tonight. One of the places where this is happening the most urgently, and I think the most effectively in terms of the on-the-ground organizing prowess, in terms of the communication of the message, is my home state of Pennsylvania, where the no ceasefire, no vote is named that. It is organized around that principle, and it is doing really important work and getting an important message out. And so I am bringing on, the night before Election Day, not a Kamala Harris representative, not a Trump surrogate, but someone from the Pennsylvania No Ceasefire, No Vote, someone who is a wonderful activist, a brilliant activist, a wonderful organizer, and just a great person. Reem Abuelhaj is here. She is an organizer, an activist, and a spokesperson for Pennsylvania No Ceasefire, No Vote. Reem, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Marc.
For those that don't know, what is the no ceasefire, no vote movement precisely?
Yeah. So the No Ceasefire, No Vote campaign is a grassroots campaign that's gathering pledges of Pennsylvania voters across the state who are pledging that they will not vote for Vice President Harris unless either a permanent ceasefire is achieved in Gaza or she publicly commits to imposing an arms embargo if she's elected. And I want to be really clear, this is not a persuasion campaign. We are not dissuading anyone from going to the polls. The uncommitted movement in Pennsylvania showed us that 60,000 people, more than 60,000 people, chose the write-in option rather than cast their ballot for President Biden in the Democratic primary. So a group of us in May, primarily Palestinian-American and Arab American organizers and organizers who had been a part of organizing the uncommitted movement in the primary, came together to answer the question, how do we build on the fact that there are thousands of voters across Pennsylvania for whom genocide is a red line, and put real pressure on the Biden-Harris administration and on the Democratic candidate to end the genocide.
When you initially told me, or I heard about through mutual friends, this movement, as well as the uncommitted movement, and when I talked to people in Michigan around the uncommitted movement, I remember talking to the mayor of Dearborn maybe 9 months ago now. I feel like it was on Al Jazeera, so it was sometime, early in the year. There was hope that they would actually change the game. There was actually hope that if Biden saw the impact in a state like Michigan, which he needed to win, of not just simply saying, stop this violence, stop this genocide, or we're not going to fund it. We thought that might make a dent, that it might actually have an impact on how he ran. It seemed like he would rather not be president than stop a genocide. Were your expectations at various points of this campaign season different? Like, was there a moment where you thought it would work versus now maybe saying, hey, she's not going to change, but we have to show them that we're going to hold them accountable if they don't change?
Well, we started this campaign with a really simple premise, which is that all of us have a moral obligation to use whatever power we have to stop a genocide. And unfortunately, President Biden and now Vice President Kamala Harris have shown us consistently over the last 13 months that they're not persuaded by mass protests, this unprecedented level of mass mobilization that we've seen, and that the only thing that they care about is swing state votes. So, at every moment in this campaign, we've continued to assess that this is the most critical leverage we have right now, is to build power around the number of voters in Pennsylvania who are withholding their vote because they feel that they can't vote for Vice President Harris while she's supporting a genocide, but who are prepared to vote for her if she commits to imposing an arms embargo, or if the Biden-Harris administration, do everything in their power to bring about an end to the genocide, which we know means, an arms embargo. We know that means other sanctions on Israel. So, I think there have been some critical moments when we've seen the power of this movement. I think it's reasonable to assess that Harris's decision to pick, Waltz as her vice presidential nominee over Shapiro, who was under fire for his, staunch support of Israel throughout its genocide, and his the number of viciously racist comments he had made about Palestinians in the past. I think it's reasonable to assess that decision was impacted by this unprecedented movement. And yet it's really concerning to see that while Vice President Harris is spending the final days of her campaign courting voters in Pennsylvania, she has a rally and I think a concert planned in Philadelphia, this evening. She is ignoring the fact that 75% of Pennsylvania Democratic voters, support the U.S. ending weapons transfers to Israel until a ceasefire is achieved.
When the Shapiro decision happened, and I think you're right, my sources on the ground were telling me that Shapiro was almost a done deal until it wasn't. Do you think they calculated that that was all the pressure that needed to be applied? Like it seemed like there was a way that everyone was saying, oh, well, if she's going to not choose Josh Shapiro, then she can be moved on this issue. I saw some optimism on the ground. I felt like it was a cynical choice by her, in retrospect, I'll throw him a bone. I'll pick a a soft Zionist versus a hard Zionist, or a quiet Zionist versus a loud Zionist. Not to mention other calculations, like maybe I don't want a Jewish vice president, because of all the vicious, ugly anti-Semitism in the world, or maybe he's going to outshine me, because he's kind of a rock star. He's like a fake Obama on the campaign trail. Like there's a lot of reasons why she may have not chosen Shapiro. Some people read into that she could be moved on this issue, that she was somehow more progressive than Biden. That was a generous interpretation. Where do you find that among the activist community that they share that generous interpretation initially, or at least optimism that she'd be different?
I mean, I think something that is really concerning is that we, even among, progressive communities, have heard a lot of talk about certain things that Harris has said about, working around the clock to secure a ceasefire, right? Her sympathy for the Palestinian mothers and children who have been killed. But, we need to be clear that she is continuing to promote a policy
Right.
of conditionally arming and funding Israel to, and that the US is sending the weapons that are actually killing those mothers and children.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we have to continue to live into a world where we have the power to pressure elected officials and candidates to be accountable to their base. I think that is, crucial. There is an ongoing genocide. Israel's continuing to escalate in the West Bank and in Lebanon. And we have to continue to organize with the vision that there is a possibility here for us to apply enough pressure on the administration that they will stop sending weapons that are killing children and their families in Gaza.
Yeah, I agree. The reason I asked about whether there was an initial optimism for her was only because I think there are people who wrongly presume that this was like an excessive option, or that activists went from 0 to 100. Like, oh, we're just going to have a no ceasefire, no vote. I actually think that Kamala Harris was given a fairly generous amount of goodwill in July that she squandered relatively quickly, whether it was the activists in Michigan who she sort of, I don't want to say shouted down, but certainly didn't give voice to, whether it's her unequivocally saying, I am not going to stop weapons embargo, a weapons embargo. Weapons embargo is not on the table. There was her surrogates were saying, hey, she might be different on this, and she made it very clear she wasn't. She said that we are always going to respect Israel's right to defend itself, which is disturbing, even that she's framing this as a defensive intervention. And on the debate stage, she echoed more than once the false rape allegations around October 7th, or certainly the debunked or certainly not proven rape allegations. And so it seems to me that Kamala Harris has had a lot of opportunities to be different and has not been different. What then? Is there any reason for us to believe that if elected, either candidate will respond to pressure in a way that's helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the first thing I want to say is I think we're all looking ahead right now to, obviously we're all sort of on the edge of our seat. What will happen with this election? And I think many people right now are asking the question, what does it look like to organize to stop the genocide under a Trump presidency? What does it look like to organize to stop the genocide under a Harris presidency? And I think we're missing something critical here, which is what does it look like to organize to stop the genocide over the next 2 months between November and January, while we have a lame duck Biden-Harris administration? And I think there's an opportunity here that isn't getting talked about, because the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign and the Biden-Harris administration have put voters of conscience, voters who want to see an end to the genocide, in an impossible position right now. For many of us, genocide is a red line. And, many people are going to grit their teeth and vote for Vice President Harris out of, rightful fear of what another Trump presidency will bring. But that is, holding back an enormous contingent of people, across this country who feel rage and grief and, desperation to take action to stop this genocide, and are being held back right now out of, fear about what is going to happen with this election. So what I expect to see is that whatever happens with this election, we're going to be landed on the other side in, a place of incredible grief and rage and desperation, and that the floodgates, will open, and that, this moment of where the Democratic Party has used this divisive election to, hold back this enormous section of the left who want to see an end to this genocide, that once that is passed, we have this opportunity to mobilize at a scale that I think is unprecedented even for this past year. If you had told me at any point, even a year ago, that 77% of Democrats would support an arms embargo nationally, I never would have believed it. So I think we can't underestimate the power of this moment. And also, just this week, 110 Palestinians were killed in a single attack in Beit Lahia. Every day that the administration does not take action is the death sentence for children and for their families in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Lebanon. So, I think that is the period of time to focus on next, as we're also setting our sights on what will come, in January and beyond.
You talked about the kind of impossible position that voters have been put in. I think that's right. As a voter myself in Pennsylvania, that's been my frustration. I have voted Green, with one exception, up and down tickets. At every opportunity to vote Green, I have, with one exception, for 20 years. And in this election, I wouldn't say fear per se, because I think it's more like I have a very clear vision of what I think a second Trump presidency is going to look like. And on the issue of Israel-Palestine, I don't think it's radically different. I think it's worse than Kamala Harris, but when you're talking genocide or you're talking just policy more broadly, they're both so awful that it's hard to be persuaded by that, although I somewhat am. I mean, I think more people would die under Trump. I do. But then there are all these other things, Supreme Court, all these other issues that I have to think about, right? As a Black person in America, I'm thinking about, certain protections, certain policies. I'm thinking, for women, I'm thinking about these things. For trans folk, I'm thinking about these things. So there's all that, right? Which makes Trump not the guy you don't want to win. And then there's the fact, as you pointed out, the genocide is a red line. And so the voter is now being forced to choose between two equally morally indefensible policy agendas. And that produces a lot of resentment. It produces a lot of frustration. And it makes a lot of people who I've spoken to say, screw it, I'm just going to stay home. I don't want to be in this race. I don't want to have to decide between these two things. But the no ceasefire, no vote movement isn't saying to respond to that impossible situation that with non-action or inactivity or not voting, you're saying write in, you're saying vote the other parts of the ticket, if I'm understanding you correctly. Talk to me about sort of offer me your message to the voter who is as frustrated as I am, but who's considering staying home, just sitting it out and not having their voice heard at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I just want to address this issue of, these like divisive narratives that we're hearing about, pro-Palestine voters who are withholding their votes, right? I think we're hearing two main stories right now. One is that this is a quote unquote protest vote, and that by not voting for Harris, we're casting our vote for Trump and throwing other marginalized people under the table, right? And then the other story I think we're hearing is that Palestinians and Arabs are too emotional right now to be thinking rationally or acting politically. And asking Palestinians right now to participate in the electoral system is like asking someone to, vote at a funeral. And so, and I think this leads to your point, which is, I I want to disrupt both of those narratives, right? Of course, we are grieving. I don't know a single person of Palestinian heritage who doesn't know someone or love somebody who's lost family members in this last year to Israeli violence. And this is a valid political position that, for if genocide is not a red line, I think we have to ask what is. And I think we can think about Palestine and Palestinians as sort of the canary in the coal mine right now that's showing us, what is so lethal about our political system. Um, so, I think voters, as I said, are being put in an impossible position. And I think there are a lot of, different ways people are going to make choices on November 5th. I think the most important thing is that we are building power around the choices that we're making, and we are being loud and clear that a policy of unconditional support to Israel to carry out its genocide is not viable anymore. I think we need to ask ourselves, if the Democratic Party can put forth a candidate who is promoting a policy of genocide in violation of U.S. and international humanitarian law, despite the fact that the vast majority of their base is opposed to that policy. What other policies might they be able to promote in future elections, despite the fact that the vast majority of their base are in opposition, so long as they're positioning themselves as the only thing standing between us and fascism? So we are calling on, all of those voters across Pennsylvania who feel that they cannot vote for a candidate who's supporting genocide to take the No Ceasefire, No Vote pledge at noceasefirenovotpa.com. I think, even tonight, you can still take the pledge.
What does that entail, taking the pledge? What does that mean?
You can go online to noceasefirenovotpa.com and, fill out your information. And the pledge is, I will not vote for Vice President Harris unless either a permanent ceasefire is achieved or she publicly commits to imposing an arms embargo if elected. So this is really about, creating a record of how many voters, how many votes are on the table, how many votes that she will lose, for not taking action. And this is also about the future of elections and how the Democratic Party will move in the future. I mean, this movement is about creating a political landscape where the Democratic Party can no longer run on a position of unconditional military and economic support to Israel to carry out a genocide.
I think that's right. I think that's been my concern about the not voting at the top of the ticket or people staying home. It's not, I think that's a principal vote. I think that's a principal choice. I just want to make sure that there's a clear record of why people stayed home, and why people, wrote in. I mean, I'd love for people as a Green Party member who are deciding that they're not voting for the corporate blue or corporate red candidate. I'd love for them to vote green. I know that's not the ask of your movement. You just, you have a very specific and clear agenda. But for me, I'm saying, y'all, if you're not pulling the lever for Harris, you're not pulling the lever for Trump, pull the lever for the Green Party. The Green Party getting 5% of the vote would mean an enormous advantage in the next election in terms of building power, getting federal funding, and growing a movement. So I'm not telling people at this moment how to vote or where to vote. That's, but what I am saying is if you've decided not to vote for Harris and you've decided not to vote for Trump, I'd love to see people put their vote in the Green Party, especially since the other independent candidates, who I love a great deal, Cornel West, Claudia de la Cruz, are not on enough ballots to make a dent, whereas the Green Party is. So it's that simple for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to be clear. I will go to the polls on election day. I will vote down the ballot. I voted in every Pennsylvania election since I turned 18. So I think the other thing to say here is, like, this is a movement of, many of us in this movement are super voters who voted in every election, right? Yeah. And I think we need to be clear that these are active voters, right? And that's who Harris is losing right now.
And this is her base. I mean, Democrats don't win presidential elections by getting the majority of white people. They haven't had the majority of white people, I think, since LBJ. They win by Black and brown people, by students, by activists, by young people, by anti-war voters who vote for them. And if enough of us are saying no, they're going to have to at least look at that. I'm not as convinced as other people are that I feel like the Democratic Party would rather go down in flames than abandon capitalism or Zionism. But you know, I understand people who say it's a moral red line for them and a non-starter for them. In addition to, and I know you said you're thinking about the next couple of months, and as we should,
Mhm.
but as you think about the long-term strategy here for ending this genocide,
Mhm.
what else is it? Are there other things we should be thinking about? Other things we should be doing? Other movements we should be joining? Like my audience in particular, we're committed to ending this genocide and doing our part, and people are just looking for more things and more ways to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's clear the Democrats aren't gonna save us, right? The politicians aren't gonna save us. And, we as I said, we need to keep putting pressure on this lame duck Biden administration to impose an arms embargo, but I think we also need to be thinking about, you know, what does a people's arms embargo look like? Where are the opportunities for us to be applying pressure to stop these weapons from getting to Israel? And I think that this is really the next conversation we need to be having. And we need to be moving with urgency, and we need to be looking around us and asking who else is organizing around this. I think this is kind of going to be the next horizon. But I just really, really want to encourage everyone who cares about this issue to be ready to take action as soon as this election is over.
Taking action as soon as this election is over, taking action uh, the moment we know who the next president is, I think is urgent. And as always, we'll be following the lead of the people on the ground who are doing the work, everyday citizens, and of course, most importantly, the people in Gaza right now who are the victims of this brutal, relentless, unyielding genocide. And I I did not imagine on October 7th that this would last a year. Um, not because and not because that's some generous vision of Israeli military violence. Just they typically protect cast lead, protect the veg. I mean, all their interventions have been a month here, 2 months there. They've attempted to at least pretend to not be doing what they're doing, and at this point, it seems like there's no pretense anymore. They've given up all pretense, and yet the international community is still responding the same way in certain ways. I mean, there's more outrage. There's the ICJ. There's all these countries. I don't mean to suggest that nobody in the world is paying attention, but there's a way that the most powerful imperial nations are still doing the same thing. Empires are going to empire. Against in the midst of that, against the backdrop of all that, I guess my only other question for you is, uh, where's your hope sit right now? I always try to sort of talk to activists about that. Where's your hope? Where are you on the hope meter right now?
There have been so many moments over this past year where I have been overwhelmed by the level of resistance that we're seeing. The conversation has just shifted tremendously over the last year. It is. I don't have words for what it means and how it feels that hasn't stopped the bombs from falling. But this is an unprecedented moment. I'm Palestinian-American. I have lived in Philadelphia my whole life. I never thought that I'd be seeing, for example, thousands and thousands of people descending on City Hall for a protest back in October of 2023, just then, right? And again, I mean, the fact that 75% of Democrats in Pennsylvania support an arms embargo, and that was unimaginable. So this is where my hope is lying, is the the level of resistance, the many, many moments that we've seen people come together, try new things, get creative, be bold, speak boldly, take risks. We have to continue to do that.
Yeah. And I know I said it was my last question, but I said one more question because I have an international audience here,
Mhm.
and people are thinking about Pennsylvania for sure, but
Mhm.
in the United States alone, there are multiple swing states that could be having this conversation. We could be having this conversation in Michigan. We could be having it in Wisconsin. you know, not to mention people who need to petition or who want to petition their own governments in other countries who are watching this. So at least on the U.S. front, how are you thinking about the PA no ceasefire, no vote movement in relation to these other states?
Yeah, well, actually, I should have mentioned this sooner, but Wisconsin and Georgia are both running similar pledge campaigns, and we've been coordinating with them. We held a coordinated day of action last week. So this, I think those coordinated efforts are really meaningful. And I think, really the heart of this is that we need to, at every moment, be thinking about what leverage we have and how to build more power. And this is what we've been doing in Pennsylvania. This is what they've been doing in Wisconsin and Georgia as well. And this is what we need to continue to do, in every part of the U.S.
Absolutely. Well, every part of the U.S. certainly needs to be part of this struggle. There are obviously states where it matters more than others. I'd love to see it happen in Mississippi or Texas, but it needs to happen in these swing states because, as you pointed out, tragically, given our electoral college, you didn't say this part, but given our electoral college and all the ridiculousness of these corporate campaigns, they don't care about most states. And as much as people like to tell you that voting Green Party or voting Communist Party or voting Socialist Party is throwing away your vote, you're pretty much throwing away your vote everywhere except like 8 states. And so while we need to change that in the long term, in the short term, right now, there are 8 states or so that matter to these candidates. And so we have to apply pressure in those states. And so the PA no ceasefire, no vote movement is not just, or campaign is not just about Pennsylvania, but as Reem just pointed out, it's a reflection of a broader national struggle to get these candidates to pay attention to a genocide that the United States continues to fund, endorse, underwrite, etc. This ceasefire this genocide could only happen with U.S. support. Maybe 3 months, 4 months, it could continue without, if the U.S. stopped every dollar. That's generous. We have the control here. We have the power here, and we have to apply pressure. Anyway, Reem, thank you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you all for sharing the work, and please let us know how we can support.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Everybody, tomorrow's the big day. Make your choices in your city, in your state. Vote up and down the ballot is my advice. Make your choices, but always, always, always vote your conscience. Do the right thing. Whatever that means to you may be different than whatever it means to some other folk, but it ain't up for grabs. Some stuff is unprincipled. Some stuff is unethical. Some stuff is just wrong. Genocide is one of those things. So whatever we have to do, whatever, in my opinion, we have to do whatever is necessary to stop this genocide. There are different thoughts, or different tactics, there are different strategies, but whatever you do tomorrow, make sure that you're voting not just your pocketbook, not just your health, not just your roads, but also thinking about our brothers and sisters, our family in Gaza right now who are part of a relentless genocide. We have to stop this immediately. And stopping the genocide in Gaza is connected to Haiti. It's connected to Sudan. It's connected to the entire global South, and it's connected to what's happening here in the United States. So it's not one or the other. In fact, it's all of us or none. None of us is free until everybody's free. It's not just a lefty slogan. It is a real analysis and solution to global oppression. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching Night School. I appreciate you watching every single night. Hit the like button if you can. Hit the subscribe button if you can. Also, if you're so inclined, hit the join button to become a monthly subscriber to the channel. It gives us the financial support we need to do the work that we do every single day. Also, want to encourage everybody, if you can't make a monthly commitment, make a one-time commitment, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. We use these funds to host Night School, to do office hours, to host the Coffee and Books podcast, and to do the Classroom in the Cell podcast with political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal. We appreciate everything that you do. We appreciate all of your contributions, and any donation will be much appreciated. If everybody gave $1, we'd be happy. If you gave $1 million, be a little happier, but anything in the middle is also appreciated. And if everybody watching right now would donate $10, we would meet our financial goals for the month. So we ask that you do that, but again, no amount is too small. We appreciate the love. Keep liking the product, keep sharing the ideas, but most of all, keep studying the knowledge, because that's what Night School is all about. See you tomorrow. Peace.